Well, if you were waiting for Donald Trump not to politicize what happened in New Orleans and in Las Vegas and be the consoler in chief and put his arms around the American people and be presidential, be dignified, forget it. It's not happening, because no sooner than the events of New Orleans unfolded than Donald Trump immediately took to the airwaves, to social media, and then led the charge of all the other MAGA to claim it was an example. It was a lesson about what happens in a world of no borders and undocumented illegal immigrants killing Americans. Except that was a lie. That the person in New Orleans and the person in Las Vegas were both American citizens born in this country who served their country, apparently honorably, in the U.S. military. One, a Green Beret, the guy who blew up the Cybertruck and put a bullet in his head, and the heinous coward who mowed down 15 people and injured dozens more in New Orleans. Had nothing to do with our immigration issues, with our border issues. In fact, what Donald Trump doesn't want to recognize is that most mass carnage is at the hands of Americans. I defy you in this, I think there's one. In the last 30 years, tell me how many mass shootings and mass carnage events have been perpetrated by illegal, undocumented immigrants. Go. I'm Michael Popok. You're on Legal AF, the YouTube channel, but then you knew that already. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button, and help us get to 500,000 like-minded people here on the Midas Touch and Legal AF channels by the beginning of the year. Let's talk about New Orleans. I grieve with New Orleans. I grieve in a way with Las Vegas. I happened to be in Las Vegas the night a number of years ago when the Harvest Festival became a shooting gallery for a madman at Mandalay Hotel and taking out, I think, 68 people. I was there the night it happened. I met with victims 2 days later at the airport. So I have a special place in my heart for Las Vegas, where I also had an office. And they're grieving in their own way. But of course, New Orleans, we just lost 15, a combination of Americans, Israeli citizens, former athletes, all sorts of people who just wanted to party and have a good time and relax on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, of all places. But this has nothing to do with our immigration problem. But Donald Trump took to social media at the moment where he could do what his lawyers have told the courts and attorney generals and anybody else who will listen, they said he would do. He'd be a unifier. He'd be a uniter. He'd be a healer. John Sauer wrote to the attorney general of New York in his effort to try to get her to throw away a $450 million civil fraud judgment on Thanksgiving by saying he's a uniter, he's a healer. It's time to smash, swords into plowshares. Here we go. Peace and love. Peace and love. Well, then I would expect there to be a dignified presidential consoler-in-chief response by Donald Trump. And all I got was the following on his Truth Social. When I said that the criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country, that statement was constantly refuted by Democrats and fake news media, but it turned out to be true. The crime rate in our country is at a level that nobody has ever seen before. All of those things are a lie. All of them. First of all, he never said that criminals from outside the country are worse than criminals inside the country. So I don't even know where he came up with that. The Democrats and news media never challenged him on that because it's not true. As I said before, go back and look at the hundreds, thousands of mass casualty events in this country. I have to call them mass casualty events now. Sometimes they use cars. Sometimes they use bombs. Sometimes they use guns and weapons. And see how many were perpetrated by people who were, I'm not talking about who was born or not born in this country, who were illegal immigrants. I think it's one. There's been a lot of former U.S. military, it's mainly white male, although there's been exceptions. We just saw one in a school shooting, female, white male or white female, documented, natural-born Americans, because of a combination of our refusal, mainly because of MAGA, to address mental health issues in America and sensible gun control, right? Combine that with the tinderbox, add the gasoline, the kerosene of Donald Trump giving license and permission, writing a permission slip for people to act out, to act inappropriately, to rip up the social contract, not to admire and respect their fellow person and their First Amendment rights, but blow them up. That's a violent rhetoric reaction from a Donald Trump. A Donald Trump is the midwife that gives us the birth of this kind of chaos, period. End of story. And Donald Trump had a moment when I thought maybe he'll step up and he'll act like the person who's elected the president of the United States, that even though he's not of my party and not of this planet when it comes to morality, civility, criminality, lawlessness, lack of respect for the Constitution, lack of respect for our history, our norms. But maybe he has grown as a person and he will say something that soothes jangled nerves, that doesn't leave us seething on the edge of chaos. Nope. Very first thing, I mentioned something to one of my producers. I said, right, because MAGA came out of the box first, trying to make this an example of failed immigration and border control policy, when it was obviously perpetrated by an American. Just because he had a foreign-sounding name, the guy from New Orleans, who I will not speak his name, 10 years in the military, rose to the rank of Master Sergeant, worked for some of the most major corporate consulting firms in the country, Deloitte & Touche, Arthur Andersen. I think it was a real estate broker. Ran ads on YouTube with like, "Hi, do you need a real estate broker?" I mean, this guy, like, if you saw him on the street, you wouldn't think the next day he's going to go rent your neighbor's truck and plow down 50 people in New Orleans. But Donald Trump and MAGA wanted, as I said to my producers, wanted the conversation at the Waffle House, not an attack on Waffle House. Love Waffle House, the people that go there. You'll often find me at a Waffle House when I'm traveling. But they wanted, with that clicking spoon in that big white coffee mug that only Waffle House has, they wanted that conversation to be, see, it was an undocumented. Joe Biden's responsible. And then hours later in the news cycle, when Legal AF and Midas Touch get together and tell you the truth, doesn't matter. That guy, that woman, that person has moved on already. And in their brain is that false factoid inserted there by the misinformation campaign and brainwashing campaign perpetrated by not just Donald Trump. He benefits from the disinformation and trolling campaigns of Russia, Iran, and China. I assure you, as dollars to donuts, social media right now is aflame with trolling from Russia, China, and Iran, linking what happened in New Orleans and the Cybertruck blowing up by the other Army veteran, Green Beret no less, linking it back to Joe Biden, to undermine the Democrats, to undermine their ability to regain power, to put Americans at each other's throats. Because the longer we're at each other's throats, the longer we are seething, the longer our teeth is on edge, the more our enemies win and the more MAGA prevails. We know that. You know that. So Donald Trump had that moment. And yet, even after it came out very quickly that the two events don't appear to be forensically linked, although I've done another hot take about how they are linked together. They are linked, even though not coordinated. Even after all the information came out very quickly about who perpetrated both crimes, I mean, their pictures were up within hours. You still had Trump as the president-elect talking on social media, seizing on erroneous Fox News reports that the truck that he used in New Orleans came across the border, suggesting that it was a migrant behind the wheels. That was Fox. First of all of these people used this. I had never heard of this app, but apparently it's out there. Somebody described it to me as the Airbnb or Verbo of car rental, that you can rent your neighbor's truck. I mean, I knew you could do it for like RVs and things. I didn't realize that instead of going to like Avis and Hertz and Seast and all the rest of these, you could, or what do you call it, economy or enterprise, you could rent your truck. Like if I had a Cybertruck, it won't happen. If I had a Cybertruck or a truck and I want to make a couple of dollars, I could lease it out like I was a leasing agency through this thing called Turo, Turo. Apparently, both of them had the idea to go rent a Turo truck. Cybertruck, that guy, can you imagine that guy or that person? Here you go, have a good time, enjoy. Okay. Packs it with fireworks, explosives, gasoline, and kills himself and sets the thing on fire all at once. New Orleans, he rents an F-150, all-American truck, picks up some sort of, or hand makes an ISIS flag at some point, and then decides he's going to kill his whole family, and then thinks, no, I'll kill other people's family. So he drives to New Orleans, which is sort of there's a connective tissue between this guy and New Orleans. He lived in Beaumont, Texas, which is sort of on the Louisiana border. Going to New Orleans looked like a common thing for him. So he knew that city pretty well. So that's where he went. And he drove around, whatever, they were updating and this is the sad irony. They were upgrading their security system, bollards that they use in the street. They want to replace the permanent ones with ones that can go up and down, but that meant they were down. And this guy was able to drive 3 blocks down Bourbon Street unobstructed and run over people. And then got out of the car and, using his army training, started firing at people and killing them that way. That wasn't an immigrant. Immigrants and undocumented are busy trying to stay in America and keep their head above water and do the dirty jobs that Americans don't want to do. Did you know that immigrants and undocumented have paid $56 billion a year, that's with a B, in taxes? $56 billion. That's a lot more than Donald Trump, who paid no taxes some years. Because they're trying hard to stay on the straight and narrow, have children, raise families. They all have the same, they're human beings. As some comedian I just watched just said, that's somebody's child. And they just want a roof over their head, 3 hots a day, send their children to good schools, have clean water and clean air and food on the table, and occasionally watch a show or go on social media or travel and see family and go to church and go and have a life. That's all they want. Just that people that are against undocumented don't understand what it's like in the countries they came from because they don't think about their ancestors. I do. I know where my ancestors came from. I know my one grandfather came to this country at 8, traveling with 2 uncles on a boat, on a ship that entered and made its way to Ellis Island after weeks at sea without his parents. Eventually reunited with his whole family over time, and he grew up to have a successful business in Asbury Park, New Jersey, in the soda and seltzer and beer business. Another grandfather was also 8 years old when he left the shtetls of Russia. If he had stayed, he would have been killed during the pogroms and during the Holocaust. Got to this country also in 1908, and by the 4th grade, now he was documented in the way we use that term today because he came through Ellis Island, and they naturalized them on the way in. Right? We should do that again. We should have a giant Ellis Island and let people come through there and naturalize them. See, that's the difference. We don't effing have naturalization centers like we used to. We need those again. I want more hardworking immigrants in this country. I'm married to one. Okay? There's no prouder patriot, as I've said before, than my wife. Do you cry at the national anthem? She does. I mean, our national anthem, because she's a proud American. If we have a dignified immigration system, it will generate dignified, wholesome patriots and American citizens. If we make them and we treat them like rats and they have to scurry and hide and live in the shadows and the darkness with one eye open and a bag packed, think of what we're going to have as we're not going to have honorable Americans. And so my grandfather, who came through, was naturalized by the 4th grade. He had already quit school and he was pushing a cart, selling who knows what. In my family's culture, we call it a schmata, selling schmatas on the Lower East Side on Orchard Street. Grew up to have a successful silk stocking manufacturing plant. but he loved this country. That's all they want. But what they're not doing is wasting energy, time, and money they don't have to go buy ammunition, to go kill or buy a car or rent a car on an app to go kill Americans. You can see already the writing is on the wall for a lawless president who doesn't respect the Constitution, our norms, civility, or anything. And Donald Trump's reaction, immediate reaction and hot take to what happened in New Orleans and by extension Las Vegas proves it. I'm going to continue to be a rigorous critic of Donald Trump and everything he does and everything he says and support the court cases that are going to be filed against him here. Legal AF. Take a minute, bounce out, hit the free subscribe button. There is a reason that we formed Legal AF right before the election. So we would be here at that hot corner of law and politics for you in 2025 and beyond as we face the most lawless president in our history. We're here for it. We're ready for it. And we're loaded for bear. I'm Michael Popok. Thank you for joining me. See you on my next hot take, my next contribution on Legal AF. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.